we're trying to create life learners. So we have to make it enjoyable. We have to make it something that's they look forward to. With reading, because reading is definitely frustrating for a lot of kids. I know my oldest, my 9-year-old, she grasps everything a lot quicker than what my 7-year-old has been doing. Because a lot of times, like, we would just sit down on the carpet and I would put a book in front of her, and it was like, don't worry about it. We're not reading today. Like, we don't have to do this. Like, let's do something else. But there's a anxiety when it comes to those letters that kids experience. And there's a lot of people that say, okay, like 5 is too early or 4 is too early for a kid to be sitting down and reading. Some say that 7 is like the standard age where kids should be learning how to read or something. What is your take on all that, especially with you having had so many 5-year-olds? Like 20 years of 5-year-olds is wild. I'm still trying to grasp it. What is your take on, like, when reading should take off in a young person's life?
I honestly think it's every child is different, and every child, I think that's why it's important to meet their needs. And I don't think there's a magic age.
Nice.
I mean, I know there's a lot of parents who just want to push, and they want their kid to be like, they want to be like, my kid's reading at 3, or, whatever, or they're like, the opposite end of the spectrum where they're like, nope, we're not even going to introduce letters till they're 7.
Yes.
I think, it's fine to introduce like the ABC song, and like, I have a 4-year-old, and he knows letters and a few sounds. And I think that's, fine. And I'm not in a rush to, like, I don't want to, like I said, I want him to love learning. I don't want to push it. I don't want to make it not fun. So if he brings it up, we do it. I might, throw on a phonics song here and there, so he hears it, but he sees a lot of my teaching stuff, that I have, especially now that I'm teaching from home, and he is curious and interested in it, and he'll be like, what's this, or what's that? And so we'll do some things with like letter magnets, and I'll tell him like the name or the sound it makes, and he picks it up, and if he's interested, great. And but I don't think there's a magic age. I think it's where there's interest from a child. And if, I think it's important to let kids know that it's okay to make mistakes. And if you make a mistake, you are learning, and that is a good thing, because a lot of kindergartners come in and they have this pressure to be perfect. And if they get something wrong, it's like the end of the world, And I always tell them it's good. Like, making mistakes is good. You're learning. So I think, just, a little bit of a challenge, but not to frustration. Like you said, when your daughter was like, looked at the book and was like, and she was crying or unhappy, then that's when you're like, okay, we're just going to take a break from that. I don't think you don't need to push that hard. A little push is good, but, to make progress, but, you got to kind of walk that fine line and know when to pull back, or when to go forward. Yeah.
Indeed. How important its parents are, because you spoke on this earlier, that you had kids who had never sat down and had a story read to them. How important is that? Because they talk about reading, like, as your child's in the womb, they talk about reading books to them. How do parents know how important it is for them, and why it's so important for them to read to their kids?
Yeah, I don't remember the specific, like, this many words or whatever, but it is crazy, even 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, how if you look at the statistics on like the vocabulary for a child being read to just a teeny bit every day is huge. And I also feel, screen time has its place. There's learning songs, there's learning videos, and that's great. I teach online. I think that's great. But there's something about a kid holding a book in their hand, looking at it, like, I mean, I might be a little different because I'm a teacher, but I had my son when he was like, got home. I had to stay in the hospital a little longer, but 2 weeks in, we got home and I was reading a book, and I swear by the time he was like a few months old, he was like I could tell he had favorites. Like he liked Baby Beluga.
Oh,
Like Baby Beluga, I would sing it and he loved that book. And then even by 2 years old, he was like doing some pre-reading skills. And all I had done, like I hadn't been like, this is the cover, this is, I just read to him. And just by reading to your kid, like he would pick up the book and he would pretend to read it, and he
no,
was only two.
yeah.
He was barely talking and he was like, pointing and saying words. And I'm like, that's in kindergarten. Some kids don't come to kindergarten at 5 with that skill. So
Mm,
I would say read to them when they're in your belly, read to them when they're a baby, because tummy time I thought was a great thing because, babies, sometimes it's real important to do that tummy time and to have them pushing up and getting those muscles for just that part. But he would get kind of bored or they get kind of fussy. A great thing I thought to do is I'll read him a book. So I'd put like a book right in front of him on the floor and I'd read it to him. And they even said like having him turn their head a certain way. He had that torticollis where they wanted him to turn his head a certain way. So then I would read on that side and then he would have to turn his head that way. And I just think makes a huge difference with learning to talk, just those listening skills. I mean, I know there's a lot of people being like, you know, um, said kids have like ADHD and things. And, and it's like they have a hard time sitting still. But I think if you've never had the expectation of sitting still and
mm.
listening to a story, then I think, well, how can you expect them to go to kindergarten and do it when they've never done it before? It's a skill that should start young as possible.
Indeed. No, I agree. I found very interesting. And like you say, your son had a favorite when he was just a few months old. Um, my 9-year-old remembers the book that I read to her when she was 2. Um, it's called Please Baby Please by Spike Lee. And it's the cutest little book, but I used to read it to her all the time when she was 2. And we found it in the library not too long ago, during the summer. And she was like, I remember this book. And I was like, really? And of course, we had to sit and read it. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like that's cool.
Yeah, and you wouldn't think 2 years old that's shows you right there how important,
Yeah.
right?
But my
Yep.
9-year-old also claims she remembers being in my womb too. So she's
So you take it with a grain of salt.
she's been interesting, okay? So let me throw that out there too.
That's
Got a
cute.
little supersonic memory over here. But yeah, she's funny. But how important is play? Because we talked about fun, we talked about the enjoyment of learning, but there's so many times that I talk to parents who have 5 and 4-year olds and they're talking about a curriculum, and I'm just like, yo, let them play. Like, just let them
Mhm.
play. How important is play at that level?
I mean, kids are always learning from play, from the time they're a baby and they can pick up a rattle to. So I think play is definitely very important. And just being able to like think on their own, use their imagination is huge because you can't teach that from a curriculum. Um, you can't get that from a curriculum. It's something they need to develop on their own, and they only can do that through play. And I just like watching kids over the years, watching my son, it's so important that they're using their imagination. And I feel like sometimes kids are, like you said, parents are, the curriculum, like they're following this curriculum. And it's great to have like where to start and what to do, but you can't just be doing that all day. They do need downtime. They do need time to process what they have learned. And I've even seen kids like they implemented in their learning into their play. Like, for example, once they start learning to write a little bit in kindergarten, they might be playing in the house and they'll like get a piece of paper and they'll be making their little grocery
Mhm.
list, you know,
Yes.
and or they'll, you know, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome. Like they'll, or I always leave like learning toys are an option, or they'll pick the like alphabet puzzle, or they'll pick, you know, the cash register and be looking when we're learning about, you know, coins or things, you know, and they, I think it needs, you know, I'm not like crazy, like into like Montessori, but I do like the part that where like it's put into like they can implement what they've learned into the play. They have a little time to process, you know, and use it. Or like they might pick to read a book to a friend or a stuffed animal or something, you know. Even if they're not reading yet, they're, you know, telling about the pictures in the book and those basic skills. So yeah, play is definitely so important. Or like building, you know, when they're learning to build with blocks or Legos, that's you can't teach that. They have to like see that, you know, they're learning about a lot of math skills, about volume and mass, and you know, taller, shorter, you know, over, under. I mean, there's just so many things that if they miss that, they'll miss basic important skills that they need to, you know.
Indeed, indeed. Very, very important. I'm reading a book called Essentialism, and I'm on a chapter called Play, and they're talking about for adults how important play is. So I just know that it's very important, and I just be hurting my little heart when I hear parents talking, oh, well, like, like I feel like I need a curriculum, and the child's like 3 or 4, and I'm just like, why don't you just let them play, or you play with them if that, if you want to lead the play, that's fine too, like, but just let them play though, like give them something to play
Mhm.
with on the floor and play with them, count with them, like, I know Miss Glow, she was with us on the expo tour this past summer, and she's really big on natural teaching, and natural teaching from her take is basically using your environment to create lessons.
Okay.
So even like using the windows in your house, how many windows do we have in here? What's the shape of the windows? How many different textures do you have in a house? She shares stories about her grandson and his love for cars, and how she would have him create the alphabet using the cars, like making the letter A's and B's and C's. And he's a phenomenal reader. He's like 7, and he's got to be reading on like a 3rd, 4th grade level. Like he's pretty dope. It probably higher than that. I'm probably not even being, yeah, but he definitely reads, and just from play, like, from playing, she feels like that came about naturally, not a force of, okay, we have to sit and read this, or we have to sit and you need to write this. It was all hey, what are we gonna do today, and then just going from there and
Mm-hmm.
letting them lead the way. I heard you say you weren't big on Montessori, but is there a
Well, I mean,
reason?
I like things. I guess I don't only use that. I like to pull things from it. Yeah.